sometimes one of the things you'll see as I enter in the Google VC address is a message that there's no street segment found. And that is occurring right now because we haven't loaded in any data from VC yet. But once we've loaded in data, it also can just come up when there are problems with some of the data sets we're getting. Election administrators aren't always perfect. When we're talking to them, they say things like, "What's your email number?" So it can be a little. They're not always able to get 100% accurate data the first time. So we take a couple passes at it, and we look to you all as developers to help actually debug the data and let us know when you see problems like that.
Is there going to be a way for us to let you know when there's issues?
Yes. So yeah, we have the API form, which is just a basic Google form that you can contact, and we also, on our official tools, will have a reporting mechanism that automates some of your some of the collections, so you don't have to enter in all of the details of what you search for. And that'll be on the official tool, the open source tool that we'll release. So then I wanted to quickly talk through, as I've been saying, just if you do take a crack, because I hope you do, building something with the API, some cautions are, as I've said, election officials have very different timelines from developers, so be aware that we're not going to have full data yet, but it should give you everything you need to develop for when the data gets here, and we're expecting that to happen around mid-October. And then this data changes frequently. We do a lot of QA, as do all of our partners and the election officials themselves, and we'll be updating things. So it's a good idea to let your users know this as well, that they should check that. They shouldn't check their polling place 2 weeks out and without double checking again before they go to vote. Our goal is to make it so easy that actually checking before you go to vote isn't the problem. It's just a Google search or a visit to one of your applications. So I wanted to then talk a bit about some of the other things our team does, both internationally and in other parts of elections and civic work. We've done voting information work like this in several other countries now that all spawned out of our work in 2008. And one of the most interesting was in the recent Egyptian elections. So at the end of November in 2011, the Egyptian people voted for their first freely elected parliament since the fall of Hosni Mubarak, and the Egyptian government actually asked us, Google, to help them in making information available because most people had never cast for a free ballot before, and the process of voting was so new that we really needed to make use of technology to help the 55 million voters in the country actually get to the polls. Beyond that, the elections in Egypt make the U.S. look simple. There were 6,500 candidates running in 50 different parties, and an individual voter had to choose from 2 different candidates out of around 100, and they had, along with special requirements like every voter had to vote for one farmer or worker and one political candidate. So these designations that are in place for a number of reasons, but make the actual process of figuring out who you're voting for pretty hard. And then even from that, when we're talking about data being available in mid-October for November 6th, they finally have their data available 72 hours in advance. So not an easy timeline. So we ended up working with a local development shop in Egypt to build something that used the same open source code and some of the same data formats and standards that we developed for the U.S. election. It looked like this. You entered in your voter ID number and got back your polling place and all of the details. And it ended up being enormously successful. The political parties in Egypt actually sent volunteers with 3G cards and laptops into the streets and set up mobile kiosks really in every town to help people find all their voting details as they were walking around in the run-up to election day. Tens of millions of people ended up using this. It was, we hope, made a positive contribution to those elections going off pretty as well as they could have.
Just curious, for voter ID,
So in Egypt, it's a national ID number, but it's not anywhere near as sensitive as a social security number. So it's just a number that everyone has. It's assigned to their voting. It's a common practice to use that to look it up, which is actually the case in a number of other countries, which from a technical side makes things a lot easier because you're not worrying about geocodes. It's more of just a table lookup. But they have many other things that complicate it as well. And so we've done projects like this. We're currently working in Kenya for their upcoming elections, and I've done work in a couple other places as well to help local developers do some similar projects to what we've done in the U.S. around the world. And then we also have started work on election results, which is really one of the single most requested things from Google users when you look at what information they care about around elections. So we did some work to provide election results to developers via fusion tables, and then on Google Maps applications on our site and embeddable by other sites. This is the map that we created for the Republican primary. And we then did some work in a couple of states to open up the process of election results. And, there are some similar challenges that will probably start to sound repetitive for voting information, where the way that people find election results in the U.S. is that when a polling place shuts down for the night, one of the judges will, who's running the election there, will write up a form that states who won and how many votes they got. They'll tape it to the door of the school or or whatever building it is. And then the Associated Press actually sends tens of thousands of people around the country to go to each one of those places, call it into a call center, and report it up. And that's just because the way that states are actually collecting this information officially and reporting it out is just too slow to be even remotely useful. So when you see the AP's numbers coming in or news networks making a call on election night, that's all because that's all from tens of thousands of people going to 300,000 different schools and other buildings and calling in these numbers. And we figure this is also something technology should be able to help with quite a bit. So what we did in Iowa back at the beginning of the year for the Iowa caucuses was that we worked with the Iowa Republican Party to collect these results via Google spreadsheets, Google Forms. And then we helped them publish those results out to fusion tables once they were verified. And the end result were instead of needing to go to 300,000 precincts and look at pieces of paper written out by election judges, you got a fusion table that said for every precinct, where was it, and for how many people voted, and how many votes were there for each of the candidates. And it just made things incredibly easy. We ended up doing this process. This process ended up letting the government beat the media in how quickly they reported the results, which was a pretty big accomplishment for them. We put it out in the fusion county roll-up as well to let you map out the different counties, and then ended up with a map like this for Iowa. The map that powers this is an open source project. It's at the Election Maps project that lets you, if you have data in a fusion table, just power your own map of, could be election results or any similar type of thing. We also did this in Mexico for their elections in July. And in this case, we actually worked with the government to make this data available in a map for the first time ever. It was until we worked with them illegal to create a map of this data on election night because you had to use these giant HTML tables that the official government agency provided to you. So we employed some of these similar processes and made a map that helped visualize the race there. Sure.
How granular can you get with the coloring of the different elements? Can you get to the street level, or is it more precinct level?
We actually haven't gone to precinct level yet, mainly because shapes of precincts don't exist in most cases.
Right.
It's one of the things we hope we can play with next year is after the election, because So we've only gone down really to the county level. In some cases, and we did this in France, and we were able to go down to their town level, where there are 300,000 towns. But we're not yet able to get 300,000 shapes on a map at once, just because that is crash those browsers.
Because a friend and I used something kind of like that in order to gauge the penetration that we were doing for campaign in 2008, but using just drawing circles on Google Maps. And it was helpful to just see, actually beforehand, like what our penetration was of the area and like where we hit, where we needed to focus on. So maybe even being able to use that not only for reporting, but beforehand as well, and seeing how successful your campaign actually is on the streets.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great thing to look at. Cool, and then realizing I have a couple minutes left, and I really wanted to close by just sharing some of the ideas I have been thinking about ways that I hope people will use our API to build off of, and then really to see, in addition to any other questions, if there are people have anyone has ideas they want to talk about ways to make use of this. So just a couple of the things there are data sets out there for that could be great to combine with this are campaign finance. They could be pretty easy to then be able to say not just who's on my ballot, but who has raised the most money of the candidates that I could vote for, who's spent the most on ads, who raised the most from super PACs. There is a lot of data available from sources like Open Secrets and MapLight that could really help people make data-driven decisions about their ballot. With social networks, I think the ability, since we're going to be providing social profiles of candidates, the ability to drill in and see what's a feed, give me a feed of what all the candidates on my ballot are saying, or which candidates are my friends talking about, which candidates are my friends planning on voting for. There have been some interesting applications that have come up that start to use this data and think about voting in that way. Because really, there's all this big deal is made about celebrity endorsements, major political figures endorsing candidates. But what matters to a lot of people, the way many voters decide about how they will vote on these local races, isn't who some celebrity tells them to vote for, it's who their friend votes for. I may not have any idea about education policy, but my friend who I know is active in the PTA and passionate about this tells me they're voting one way for school board. So how can we bring those connections online too? And then really a great thing to do is just remind your users. If you have a user base on the site, the API can make it pretty easy to, around election day, provide a service without people leaving your site. They're your users, you don't need to send them to us, to actually tell them where to vote and you be able to do your part in a pretty easy way that way. So those are just some, hopefully, ideas to see if you have any thoughts about building off of this. But, thank you for your time. If anyone has any questions, I really would love to chat more about it. Sure.
I was going to ask you about how you see the relationship or the interplay between this data and, let's say, Sunlight Labs or the League of Women Voters, for that matter.
Yeah, Sunlight has a lot of really great data sets. So we're actually we work with them on projects all the time, and I think we're looking at ways already that we can use the data together, and a lot of times the work they do around transparency of active representatives, as well as money in politics, can be really a great way to match, a great extension of this data as well. So, yeah, we love that. Sure.
I don't know if you mentioned this already, but historical voter information, is that something that these voters
Historical meaning results or?
Voting record.
Oh, so we don't have that information. That's we're very focused on just making the process of voting easier. I know there have been a lot of really interesting, there's been a lot of interesting work in that space. I know a company, Nation Builder, earlier that has been doing some really interesting work in opening up the voter file. So it's not something that we've worked on. We're all about process, but it's definitely going to be valuable.
Are you talking about the candidate voter record? The voters.
Sure.
It seems to me that what you're doing is you're taking a physical address and mapping it to a polling location.
Yes.
Have you ever thought about backing up a level and looking at the actual voter file of registered voters? Because I may put in a physical address, but I may have forgotten to change my registration when I moved across the city 2 years ago. And I may get to the polling location and find out I'm not even registered there. Because that would also, it would be very interesting to people who think that they are registered, turns out that they're not. And also, I believe in most states, the way that they deal with polling booths is that at the state level, each record is assigned an authoritative polling place. So that might eliminate some other problems of trying to go ahead and deal with the ambiguities of what street addresses go ahead and match up to which polling places.
Yeah, so one of the big goals of the Voting Information Project was to be able to do this without needing to get any personal information. So we feel like you should be able to know where you go because this is assigned geographically. It shouldn't depend on you individually. We do actually, because we work with some of the address to precinct data that the voter file makes available for states that don't produce these feeds for the Voting Information Project. But partly because of the challenges of dealing with personal information, it's not something we feel comfortable with. But it is a good way to be able to do this as well.
Related to that, is voter registration information included in your feed?
It is, however, most of the deadlines will have passed by the time we get this data, which is unfortunate. We do, however, have a site available at google.com/elections/vote that will let you find your information for any state, as well as information for military and overseas voters. And we've been doing some work in about 30 states this week. We put the promotions on the Google homepage as well to remind people of the deadline for it. Unfortunately, the deadline's not working out for the API.
Could you enter Latin long instead of address?
We actually didn't know you could do this, but one of the developers on the forum pointed it out, and it works, yes. We realized our tech lead, we have a new feature now, so yes, it does work, we think.
What's the format? Just something, comma, something? Or?
Yeah, everything is on the back end run through what you're used to from Google Maps, so pretty much anything you can type into a Google Maps box will work with this. The caution against lat long though is if it's not precise, if you're on a different side of the street, then you do something else. So